Hey everyone, this is Dr. Chris with Radio Horror on 91.3 FM, WCUW in Worcester, Massachusetts. If you're tuning into our YouTube channel, we thank you for tuning in. If you're catching us on the air right now on 91.3 FM or WCUW.org, again, we also thank you for tuning into the Radio Horror Show. This review happens to be one of my favorite vampire franchises, despite the fact its goofiness and outrageous amounts of use of CGI. It's the Underworld franchise, usually starring Kate Beckinsale. She's been in 3 of the films. One of the other films, The Rise of the Lycans, actually had Roma Mitra in it. Kate Beckinsale was also in Underworld, the sequel, and Underworld Awakening. We're going to not go through a review for every single film. There's basically some great things about the DVDs I always wanted to point out to people that didn't realize it. The Underworld films, for anyone that's not familiar with them, basically is vampires versus werewolves. It was something that a lot of people had wanted to see for quite some time. You get the werewolves in it are called Lycans. In fact, they get their own movie called Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. And the vampires who hunt the werewolves are called the Death Dealers, but they're still called vampires. This was definitely heavily inspired by The Matrix because everyone's wearing a lot of black leather, and they're doing all those weird wire tricks you see them flipping upside down. But let me tell you, to be able to watch Kate Beckinsale in skin-tight leather catsuits and leather jackets is fantastic. One of the things I want to point out about the first DVD for the Underworld film, it came with this great little sketch-to-scene comparison. Basically, you can go over a lot of great storyboard stuff for the Underworld film. Little 16-page booklet. It also came with a Underworld comic book. This is the entire comic book adaptation of the movie, which is pretty cool. Usually you get like 1 or 2 page insert, and that's not fantastic at all. But in this, you actually get an entire Underworld comic book. It was actually put up by IDW, who had launched their comic book company through the release of Steve Niles and Ben Templesmith's 30 Days of Night. The art in this is done by Nick Posty and Nick Markonovich, and the story is by Kevin Grenick and Len Wiseman and Danny McBride. I'm not sure if that's the same comedian, Danny McBride, but Len Wiseman is the director of 2 of the Underworld films and the producer of the last 2. He's also married to Kate Beckinsale, so he lucked out. One of the great bonus material you'll find on the Underworld original DVD, this is actually the special edition that came out 6 months later after the original single disc. I upgraded, mainly because of the massive thing of bonus material, and of course this is also the extended cut with more blood and stuff. And there's not a lot of extra scenes in this, but one of the cool things about this I wanted to point out is Fang and Fiction. It's a 2-hour documentary on the second disc of bonus material. On disc 1 with the movie. That's a lot about real life vampires in the modern day setting, as well as the culture and the history of vampire lore. Something else you might want to check out if you've always wondered about real vampire culture and lore is Piercing the Darkness: Undercover with Vampires in America Today. It's by Catherine Ramsland. She's also the autobiographer of Anne Rice. So she knows a little bit about The Damned, having to write the autobiography of the Queen of the Damned. Another book I'd like to point out is by Konstantinos. This is Vampires: The Occult Truth. Another great book that you should probably look up. Both of these books are out of print, but I've seen them on Amazon plenty of times that you shouldn't have to worry about paying like an outrageous fee for them. But the Piercing the Darkness, Undercover with Vampires in America Today, is probably the one book I can highly recommend for anyone wanting to learn about vampire lore in America right now. The book came out in 1999, 1998, so the subject matter is not that out of date if you've ever been to any type of unusual goth club or have been studied up on anyone who claims to be a vampire. It's fascinating material to read. I will definitely have to say that. But if you can find this unrated 2-disc set, I would recommend it. I don't know if the Blu-ray carries over all this bonus material, It's got this great see-through cover, and then you can flip the box around and basically change the course of the moon. On the back, you also have the normal making of, featurettes, creature effects, stuff like that. The one thing I want to point out about the Underworld films is that when the actors who play the Lycans in this, the werewolves, they're actually actors in animatronic still-like costumes. Their transformations might still be CGI, but the actors themselves are really portraying those werewolves. Unlike in like the Twilight movies where they're just CGI-looking giant wolves. Really stupid. In Underworld Evolution, Scott Speedman, who plays the vampire Lycan hybrid that Kate Beckinsale's Celine character falls in love with, returns with her, and they're basically on the run from the newly risen vampire who is like he's the upcoming Lord of the Vampires, and he basically wants to kill the vampire werewolf hybrid. It's definitely an extension of the first film. These two films happen to really, complement each other, and you can't watch one without the other. Again, the same type of they load these things with bonus material, bloodlines from script to screen, making a featurette, monster makeup, building a saga, designs, and each one of these also happens to have a music video on here. This one on here is from Finch, Worms of the Earth. This one is The Portrait in Black by Atreyu. The Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, also happens to have the Death Club by William Control. And then Underworld Awakening happens to have Heavy Prey by Lacey Sturm, featuring Gino Leonardo. None of these bands I'm familiar with, but if you've ever picked up the Underworld soundtracks, they're some of the most amazing rock gothic music I've heard in a long time, and a lot of people agree. The soundtrack compilations for the Underworld films are fantastic. In Rise of the Lycans, you have Roma Mitra, who I'm not familiar with, playing the daughter of Victor. Now, Victor is the vampire that was revealed in this film to have betrayed Celine and killed her family when it was blamed on Martin Sheen's character, the werewolf, the leader of the Lycans. He plays Lucian, and Lucian fell in love with Roma Mitra, who just does look a lot like Kate Beckinsale, and impregnated her. And Victor had her dragged out to the sun and burned alive in front of her lover to prove a point. And that's basically what started the war. That was kind of revealed in the first Underworld movie, but they decided to make an entire sequel to emphasize the rise of the werewolves and show how they were the slaves of the vampires. A lot of these movies, if you happen to notice on the cover, and they have this very blue tint to them. If you ever watched The Matrix had this very green tint to the film. This is supposed to show the more gothic setting of the movie. The movie Daybreakers was also like this, by the way. And then, of course, we had the most recent film, which came out in 2012. And there's another Underworld movie coming out in 2016, Underworld: The Next Generation. And this takes place 12 years later, and Celine wakes up and finds out that she has given birth to a daughter with Michael, her vampire werewolf hybrid boyfriend, and was taken from her and raised without her while she's been cryogenically frozen. One of the most ridiculous things a lot of people hated about this movie was the unrealistic portrayals of the werewolves were a little bit too CGI. And then, of course, when Celine wakes up, they have all of her gear sitting right next to her in her cryotube. Her black leather corset and jumpsuit and her boots. And it's like, who the heck would leave that in the cryo chamber right next to her? It makes no sense whatsoever. One of the actors that really stands out in this movie that a lot of people really enjoyed, it happens to be on Game of Thrones, is Charles Dance. He played Tywin Lannister, the father of Cersei and Jaime Lannister, and the father of Tyrion. And he's also been in films like Alien 3 and The Last Action Hero. And he plays the kind of last remaining elder vampire in this movie who has all his people living underground. A lot of people call this the best Underworld yet. I don't think so. It's great to see Kate Beckinsale come back to the role after 6 years of being away from it, which was a pretty big deal. Not a lot of people didn't think she was going to come back to it, but she did. She's fantastic in it. She's playing the same character. The vampires look very sexy, and they're doing something different with it by setting it into a little bit in the future, and everyone's aware of the existence of vampires and werewolves now, and vampires and werewolves have almost been hunted to extinction, but there's a little bit of conspiracy in the film that a lot of people will find out later on when they watch it. This is the only film I actually have on Blu-ray. Everything else I happen to have on DVD. It's packed full of bonus material. There's one cool thing on here that is pretty nice. Is that it has a Cracking in the Underworld picture-in-picture experience, and that basically allows you to watch it with a pop-up video-like setting, and it shows you clips from the other movies explaining things about the vampire werewolf world, and I thought that was pretty cool. Um, it can be a little bit over-encompassing from the film itself, so if you want to watch the film by itself or you've never seen it, I would probably recommend watching the film without the added pop-up video feature. Like I said, in 2016, there's a new Underworld movie coming out, Underworld: The Next Generation. There's no word yet on who's going to be in it. The daughter of Celine and Michael is the only rumored actress to come back to the franchise. Her name is India Elsley, and she's been on a TV series called Secret Life of The Secret Life of an American Teenager, and Sister Cam and Kite. She was in the live action adaptation of the Japanese anime cartoon about the female assassin Kite. So that should be very interesting if they're going to release that in the States. There's been no word on it yet. But think of Leon, the character played by Natalie Portman, Leon the Professional, and then you'll have Kite. And that's basically the best way I can describe it. If you can find the DVD of the anime, that's fantastic. So the actress who plays Celine's daughter in this is playing the Japanese anime character Kite, which is kind of cool. But if you have a chance, check out our other videos on YouTube. Subscribe, like, leave comments. We do reviews on the show on Sunday night, becoming Monday morning at midnight to 2 a.m. It's Dr. Chris and Pamela Isley. Don't forget we're also on Facebook at Radio Horror. We're on Twitter at Skeleton Girl and Chris DSAV. And check out the Radio Horror website, radiohorror.wordpress.com. This is Dr. Chris of Radio Horror saying have a good night.